Support for the Dice Tower comes from listeners like you, and from TheOp, also known as USAopoly, and from GameNerds.com. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 724.
The Spiel des Jahres winners.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Geoff heads to the Olympics, and we answer questions about age-old design debates, age-old questions about the value of board games, and age-old balance between aesthetics and accessibility. Finally, we look back at our favorite award winners with our top 10 recipients of the Spiel des Jahres. I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the Susan Lucci of board gaming, Tom Vassell.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Really? See, I was wondering if, I'm sure there is a certain segment of our listenership that at this point doesn't know who Susan Lucci is. Susan Lucci is an actress who was on All My Children for many, many years.
I feel like that's fair to know that I would not know that.
You haven't been watching All My Children this whole time?
I have not. No.
And for many years, she was nominated for a Daytime Emmy for her role on that show and did not win. She was like the longest running actress to ever have that many nominations and never a win. She did finally win the award at one point. It was a big deal. But this is relating to you, Tom, because as far as I know, you have not won the Spiel des Jahres.
I don't think I'm even eligible to ever have won.
Well, okay, maybe
Spiel
not.
des Jahres.
But you still haven't won, no matter what reason it is.
True.
You haven't won the Spiel des Jahres.
I do remember hearing a similar thing about Randy Newman. It took a long time for him to win.
Yeah.
An Oscar for his marvelous music.
Yes.
So I pay attention to that more than I do the
Daytime Emmy Awards.
Soaps.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to criticize Daytime Emmy. I just don't watch daytime soaps. So that does sound like a name I should know.
Yeah, my mom watched that stuff.
Hey, it's okay to watch soaps. I have no problem with it. I just don't do it. Are soaps still running?
There's a few that still are, but I don't think All My Children is one of them.
Yeah, because nowadays you can just watch anything, anytime, anywhere, and so many regular TV shows have turned into soap operas.
Right.
Essentially.
Yes.
All right, folks. Well, welcome to the Dice Hour. We're glad to have you here. We're here to talk all about board games. In fact, later on in the episode, we'll be talking about board games that have won the biggest award of all time, the Spiel des Jahres.
Indeed.
Or the biggest gaming award. But before we do that, there are so many other games to talk about, and I'm trying to figure out how many games Eric is talking about, and I think it's 3.
I have a lot of colons in my description.
You really do. Is that 3 games or 16?
It is. It's a lot. There's a lot of words. I had to go to a second line on the document. Well, shall I begin?
I think so. It didn't take you that much time just to finish the name of the games.
Indeed. So Restoration Games a few weeks ago announced that they were taking on the job of refurbishing Omega Virus, the classic electronic squawk box game where you fight an evil computer. And they did this by releasing a game on its own. The game is called Omega Virus Prologue. This is just a little 2-player dueling card game. It's by Steve Aramini. And I don't know how much this actually translates to what will become the new refurbished Omega Virus. But you are dueling against another player. You have a stack of cards that have quadrants on them, colored quadrants that represent rooms that you are building, and you are attempting to connect pieces of equipment. And the first player to connect all 3 pieces of equipment, there's a piece of yellow equipment, blue equipment, red equipment. First player to do that ends the round and wins a speed bonus card. However, several of these cards are locked on the back of the cards. You might have a color that says this one is locked until you get the yellow key, and this one is locked until you get the red key. Others are available right away. And in order to get the key, the red key, blue key, and yellow key, you have to form combinations of that color room by laying down these cards and forming patterns. And once you match the pattern exactly that relates to, say, the blue key, you now have the blue key and you can play those locked blue cards. And you can't connect all the pieces of equipment until you have all three keys. This is a speed game. You say ready, set, go, and you are doing this as quickly as possible. You are also trying to make patterns that score specific scoring objectives. You might want the largest red room or the most yellow rooms possible of a certain size. So this continues until somebody ends the round. They get a speed bonus. Then you look at the 3 scoring objectives for the round. That's going to score points. And so you end up with, 4 points to 2 points at the end of a round. You do this again another 2 times. The most points wins the game at the end. This is a very simple game. It's just a small little deck of these square cards. I like it as a quick little duel game. It's exceedingly simple to explain. I played it against my mom. We went to visit my parents, and she was a little wary at first, just looking at it's a very stark design. There's not a whole lot going on. There's a lot of computer code on the back of the cards. She was confused about what side of the cards was the face up, face down for a little while. But once we got going, she got really into it and was enjoying the duel aspect, and we were going back and forth. It was actually a very close game. This game is going to be released at Gen Con. At least that's the plan. It's hard to say for sure when, with shipping being the way it is, but it's also going to be available on the website. For basically a press release for another game, it's a pretty unique little thing that ends up being a fun duel card game. That is Omega Virus Prologue from Restoration Games.
The problem I have here is that you're saying all that, and I'm just so jaded here, I think, in the sense of, since it is a press release for another game, since it is
you
a
think
prologue,
it would be almost better if it wasn't related to the big game?
I think you might be right, because I'm going into this. I mean, I've heard people saying good things about it, but it was also kind of a, I'm like, well, sure, but it's, early copies and there's excitement and everyone wants the real Omega Virus, and maybe they're just saying, well, this is good enough for now, and I don't know.
I think this stands on its own. It is, again, a pretty simple, quick card game. I know people don't like the word filler, but it is that filler weight. This is a very quick. Do they even say what the normal time frame is on here? What do they tell us it is?
172 minutes.
100. It's a lot less than that.
Seconds, sorry.
Yeah, closer. Each round is maybe just a couple minutes. 2 to 3 minutes, and you do 3 rounds. So within 15 minutes, you have played a full game of this. It is exceedingly simple and quick.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk about a quick game, too, and that's Snakes.
How many S's are in that?
I think it's 3, but I'm not sure. I might have got bored of typing it out. Snakes is a party game. In fact, that's all I'm talking about today, folks. Sorry, I talked about such big games last time, and this one does have 3 S's at the end, 4 S's in total. Snakes is from Big Potato Games, and that's pretty much all they make is party games. But it's from Phil Walker Harding, who designs. He has a pretty much straight. I like everything he does, I think. Anyway, this is a party game in which there's just a small deck of cards that have multiple choice questions on them. And actually, didn't you play this with me, Eric?
I don't know.
Because we played it during the Summer Spectacular, where some people were snakes, and they knew the answer to the question.
Yes, and there was like a ferret or something.
Yes. All right.
Yes,
Great.
I did play this.
Well, I guess I'm not going to put down it's memorable, but
I thought it was called ferrets.
No, it's not. One person is it the ferret of truth?
It's something like that.
It's the mongoose of truth.
Mongoose of truth.
Ferrets? I'm not listening to Eric. He's messing me up. So one person's the mongoose of truth. Anyway, at the beginning of every round. Is it
mongeese? Is that the plural? Or is it mongooses?
It doesn't matter.
Is it mongeese?
There's only one.
Oh, okay.
So one person's the mongoose, and everyone gets these random rolls. One person's a mongoose. Some people are snakes, and some people are just ordinary people. The mongoose reveals himself, and then we turn over a card, and it will ask a question like this: what's a truel? a duel between three people, a lie that's mostly true, or a type of farming tool, a truel, Truel. I don't know how it's pronounced. And so then everyone closes their eyes, and the mongoose flips the card over, and the snakes open their eyes and see the answer, A, B, or C. They then turn the card back over, and then everyone starts talking about it. And you have a very short time in which you all have to come to some sort of agreement, or not agreement, but you're all guessing what the answer is.
Right.
And so everyone knows that the mongoose is honestly trying to figure it out, because most of the questions so far, I haven't got to one where I knew what it was.
Right.
But you act like you know what it is, even if you are an honest person, because you are trying to figure out the right answer and you're talking. But you know that there's at least 2+ people who actively are trying to get you to get it wrong.
Yeah.
So this has some similarities to Insider or Werewords. A lot of similarities to that game. Yeah. Once everyone decides, everyone picks their answer from some cards, you flip it over. The snakes are just trying to get people to get it wrong. That's how you get points. And everyone else is trying to get it right. That's how you get points. It's a pretty simple game. I was a little dissuaded by I was like, there's only like 100 cards in here. But you only go through like 6 in a game.
Okay.
So there's a lot per game. I mean, there's a lot of games that are in there.
Right.
And I found it to be a really fun, and I don't care if I'm using this word, filler.
Yeah.
Find me a better word. Actually, people will find a better word, but I like using this word. But it's a good party game to get things going. It's easy to play. Even if you're the snake, you don't have to lie so much. In fact, you could even point towards the answer that's correct.
Right.
What do you care? Because then people might doubt you and pick a different answer.
Yeah. You just have to get people to guess wrong. And it's if people guess randomly, you're going to win because it's 2/3.
I had a lot of fun with this one. It's not amazing, but it's a solid party game that's pretty easy to pull out and play. So that's Snakes.
Yes, I did. Now that I remember the mongoose, I did really enjoy this one as well. Next for me is one of the latest in the Exit series. This is a larger...
Spoilers.
Well, I'm not going to go too far into this. Exit the Sacred Temple is the name of this one, and this is one of the jigsaw puzzle variety. I know, Tom, you had 2 of these in the studio. Is this the one you played or the one that Z played?
It has to be the one Z played because I played one with a boat on the front. Okay. So like a lighthouse or something. The deserted lighthouse, that's the one I played.
Well, this is the Sacred Temple that uses a jigsaw puzzle. The standard Exit games usually have a booklet that you are flipping through that have a bunch of the puzzles and the visual elements that you're dealing with, and a deck of cards that relate to the clues you can look at and the puzzle solutions, as well as more items and puzzle stuff that you're going to unlock over the course of the game. Both versions of Exit have this code wheel. I should back up and say that the jigsaw puzzle versions use the jigsaw puzzles. There's 4 different puzzles in the box, and those are basically what would have been the booklet in a standard Exit game. They sort of create a tableau, you solve the puzzle, and it gives you a panorama that you're looking at that has 3 or 4 puzzles on it that you will then use to solve more stuff.
And you have to build these puzzles without knowing what it looks like.
And they're not that hard puzzles.
They're 80 pieces. They're not overly difficult, but not knowing the picture added some fun. I enjoyed that part.
Sure. And some, depending on what the pattern of the pieces are, it can be a little more difficult. I think the 4th puzzle in this set was a little trickier, just figuring out how it all went together. But it's the standard puzzle techniques work fine. There's a border and there's clear colors and distinctions and stuff like that. The twist with the code wheel in regular Exit, you sort of come up with say the green lock, and you will line up the 3 numbers, and it will give you a number that shows up in a window, and you have to look that up in a deck. And then if you're close, it says, you might be right. Where did you see the green lock? And then you're like, oh, it was on a door. And then you look up another number in this deck. Hey, you're right. Or no, you're wrong. I like the more streamlined version in this, where you've got the wheel and you line up the numbers, and then you flip the dial over and there's a window on the back. And if that same color lock shows up on the back, you're correct. So it's it's just a little bit faster. It's just sort of fiddly in the original Exit. It works, but it takes a little more time. You got to put the dial down and look through this deck, and then you got to, look it up twice, basically. This, you flip it over. Oh, I'm right. Great. Move on. And you will unlock little envelopes, little pamphlets, basically, that give you more of the story. The clues in this version are all in the instruction manual, as opposed to being in a deck of cards. It gives you a little more space to explain some of the solutions. And much like the standard exits, there were times that I just did not understand the logic that they were trying to get me to get. I would figure out like the physical aspect that they were trying to get me to do, but I just couldn't make the leap of what I was supposed to do with that information. So I think maybe 3 of the puzzles or so I had to use the clues for. I followed your advice, Tom. We did not time ourselves this time. I think I'm going to move forward with exit games that way from here on out. That I don't care. I just want to get through it and get to the end. I don't care how many stars I get. I think it took us, they give you a little more time for these because you have to solve the jigsaw puzzles. I think the best you can do is under 90 minutes, but I think it took us closer to 2.5 hours to get all the way through this. And it was 2 of us sort of working our way at a leisurely pace and solving the puzzles and having to get a few clues. I think it's a lovely twist. Having a jigsaw puzzle offers some interesting opportunities for how to treat these new cardboard components in new ways, and how the puzzle and the little pamphlets and all of that relate to each other is very cool, and it keeps the freshness of an exit puzzle together. So if you're looking for a neat twist, and especially like with my mom, you have someone who's a fan of jigsaw puzzles, this is kind of a cool way to get them interested in an exit title. So that's Exit, the Sacred Temple. Thumbs up, a lovely entry in the Exit series.
I think I'm kind of done with the time part of this.
Yeah.
Which is, I think I've been done with that for, I don't know, a long time ago.
Yeah, it took me a little longer to get there, but I'm there too.
I thought it was a unique, fun experience with the puzzles, but I don't know. These exit games are just, I feel like I've reached my fill of them.
There's a saturation point?
I feel like that's true. I feel like now when I get a box, I'm like, all right, here we go. Before we even start, we're going to search everything in this box.
Yeah.
As soon as we run into a puzzle, we're going to now do this. And I wonder if people who go all over the world and do escape rooms run into that same problem. They walk in,
they see the same puzzles, and Yeah, so that's a Caesar cipher, that's this and that's, I recognize those symbols. Oh, that lock, I know how that lock's going to open. Yeah, I can see if you do enough of this, there's only so many variations you can come up with, and the pressure to do something unique. And while this still does some unique stuff, there are, how to explain this without being spoilery? Once you've learned that something is in bounds for a game like this, then you are constantly looking within those bounds. So once you know that the box of exit,
too much.
Yeah,
that's a good question. But even with this one, this doesn't spoil anything. But the puzzles are more than just pictures. At least in the one I played, that there's a possibility that somehow the puzzle pieces are used in other ways, and it's enough that it happens the entire time, at least in the one I played.
Right. Simply solving the puzzle the first time is not all you're going to do with those pieces.
And sometimes I found it to be, I was like, that is amazing. And the final puzzle of the last one, I thought, even when I read the clues on how to do it, by the way, I think I like the clue system better in the original Exit games. Because in this one, you read it in a book. And you read
in a book, they tell you to fold over sections, so you're still only seeing clue 1, clue 2, and then you open it up.
Just give me cards if I'm going to have to fold over pages of a book.
That's
but
true.
Anyway, the final one, even after reading how to do it, I was like, okay, I guess. Okay, I did it. This has happened to me a few times with escape room games where I even know how to do the puzzle. And I go, cool. I barely got it done knowing how to do it.
Yeah.
The Dollhouse one from Think Fun was that way for me with a couple puzzles.
Yep.
Where they were like, well, just do this. I was like, oh, so that's what they were talking about. I can't even do this when they're telling me how to do it.
Yes.
I've really become a full-fledged Unlock Man. I just recently ranked the Unlock scenarios on our video channel. There's 27 of them, so I ranked them all. And I noticed when I was ranking them that the newer ones all ranked fairly highly, with the occasional dud.
Sure.
While the original ones, and when I was thinking about them, like, they've really improved. That system gets better all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Exit games started way stronger, in my opinion, than Unlock games did. But I don't think that they've gotten better. They've just gotten slightly different.
Yeah.
This puzzle aspect adds a new wrinkle, and it's cool. But if I played one puzzle one, like I played the hard one, I haven't played the one Eric played, I don't feel like I need to go hunt his down and play it. I feel like I've seen the puzzle gimmick now.
Yeah.
What about you? Would you want to play another puzzle one?
I think in the similar situation, next time I'm going to see my folks again, I think I will probably hunt the other one down. Because that was harder. A nice junction. I don't think my mom would have wanted to play an exit room or an escape room game without the puzzle aspect.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Mystic Paths.
Ooh,
Mystic Paths is from R&R Games. And if you look at the board game here for Mystic Paths, if you look at the cover, go online and look at it, it looks like it is some weird Euro game. You look at the cover, it almost looks like the cover of Myst.
Okay.
Back in the days. And I'm like, ooh.
That sounds
this must
fun.
be one of their heavy Euro games. Nope, it's a party game.
Oh. But
it's a logic party game. In the same bucket I would put code names.
All right.
So in this game, you have this big circle you put out. That's your board. And you fill this with little circles that are various words. From clowns to bubble wrap to Genghis Khan to the Statue of Liberty to, I think, coronavirus was one of the words on these things. So you just spread them out. There's different ones. And connecting all these different circles are paths. Then you draw a card, and you put your character on one starting spot. You draw a secret card from a big pile, and it shows you your path across the board. You're going to cross 9 of these circles. You might even cross the same one twice. It might say, okay, you start here. This is spot 1. Go forward to spot 2. Go left to spot 3. Go forward to spot 4. Go right to spot 5, etc. So that's your secret path. You then will draw 4 clue cards. These clue cards each have 2 clues on them. So they might say something like happy or edible or over the top or content. Whatever. There's just clues. You stick a clue under the numbers 1, 2, and 3 in front of you, showing people clues to your first 3 paths. Steps on your path. So once everyone does that, everyone does it simultaneously because everyone has their own path. Mm-hmm. It's a cooperative game. So we'll go, okay, let's start with Eric. Eric's number 1 clue says edible. This is the spot he started. He can go to 3 places from that.
Okay.
It shows Hot Pockets, Genghis Khan, and the Statue of Liberty. All right, we know it's not the Statue of Liberty. We're assuming it's not Genghis Khan.
Assuming it's not Genghis Khan.
But at the same time, are Hot Pockets really edible? And so everyone discusses this and debates it.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. And finally we say, it's Hot Pockets. And Eric's like, yes. So we move to Hot Pockets, and then we look at clue 2. Now, once you move off your first one, clue 2 has it can go to like 5 different spots. If you ever get it wrong at any point, the person who's sitting there silently while you're all doing this discussion puts a marker on it to show that you got it wrong, and then their turn's over. So you might not get anywhere with a person, but you could go as far as all 3.
Okay.
In the next round, you always put out 3 numbers. So let's say I got Eric's 1 and 2, but didn't get his 3. In the next round, Eric would put out his 3, 4, and 5, but he would put another clue under 3. So 3 would have 2 clues. And also, we would know that one of the spots we had tried to go to last time was no. So we hopefully will get it.
Right.
You can also always put a token on the card to say that it means no, like not edible. Or not happy. Or
all
whatever.
Right. Yep. So then what's the timer?
It's you have a certain number of rounds. I want to say 4. Maybe it's I don't remember the number of rounds, but after a certain number of rounds, you will score based on how far everybody's gotten. I don't care. That scoring is fine, but just playing the game itself is fun. Yeah. Now, there's a variant that I think is even better where you just play as teams. and each team is trying to do it faster than the other team. So then it becomes a game.
A race.
And I think the best way to do teams is to do 3-on-3. Because if you do 2-on-2, that works, but there's no discussion then.
Right. Yeah.
And I like discussion. So if you've ever played Codenames, Codenames is a very thoughtful, thinky game when it's 2 versus 2. But when it's 3 versus 3, suddenly it changes because two people are like bantering back and forth.
Yep.
They'll go, oh, Eric wouldn't think Genghis Khan is edible. I'm like, you don't know Eric. He's a dark mind. And we go back and forth on this, right? And it's silly and it's fun. And I tend to like that. I like both, right? I like the very password nature of the 2 versus 2.
Okay.
But I also like that discussion. I really enjoyed this one. And like I said in my video review, this one came with, I think, like 10 blank circles. And normally that irritates me. Normally I'm like, fill these in yourself, you lazy publisher. Because my handwriting doesn't look neat anyway. It won't look that great. But here I'm like, wow, because these words, you can put anything out there. Anything, and it works. So
cool.
I really like this one. It's Mystic Paths. Check it out from R&R Games.
Neat. Well, I feel like I've been a little too positive this episode, so let's move on to a game called Sweet Existence, a Strange Planet card game.
This sounds like a popular webcomic.
It does. And in fact, the webcomic is written by Nathan W. Pyle. You may have seen them. They have quite the presence on Facebook. There are these aliens that experience normal human experiences, but they've sort of seen them through the lens of being, aliens, so that they reword things differently. It's very cute. I love the comic. It is a lot of fun. Nathan W. Pyle gets the design credit for this game as well, which is put out by Hasbro. In Sweet Existence.
That's a spoiler, Eric.
That it's Hasbro. It might be. So, it might be, as we've seen such wonderful themed games come out in the last few years, you would be right to sometimes assume that maybe a themed game isn't necessarily terrible. There are some fantastic themed games out there right now. And you would be wrong if you thought that about Sweet Existence, a Strange Planet card game. There are a few decks in this game, and there's a bunch of cardboard cookies, which are these sweet discs that you are attempting to get. Everybody gets a certain number of these sweet discs at the beginning of the game. You have cards that get put face down in front of you. You have 3 of these cards. One of them, or at least one of them, possibly 2 if you have enough players, is the Perish card, which shows one of the aliens watering a dead plant. And that they've been all mixed together with the ones that are not Perish cards, and they're spread around. And I believe you get to look at them first. Yeah, you do know what your initial set of cards looks like. But they're all face down at the beginning. And then you turn up, you are given a team. You're dealt out another set of cards. You might have a partner or 2 across the table from you, or you might be a solo player and not have any partners for some reason. Then you flip up a card, and if it's a pink card, you do what the card says. It might be flip up one of your face-down cards, or exchange your face-down cards with somebody else, or everybody passes one to the right. So you've done that, and your turn is over. If you get a purple card, you give it to someone. And once someone has 2 purple cards, then they have to flip up one of their face-down cards in front of them. And that also earns some sweet discs for their teammates. The whole thing is very luck dependent. Very, very luck dependent. It feels, when you first look at it, it feels like good cop, bad cop, where you've got these secret cards, you're not sure where the Perish card is, you've got some allegiances floating around that can get exchanged and stuff, but this has no agency at all. The cards have images from the comics on them, so you can read them and sort of chuckle quietly to yourself as you explore the game. But beyond an exploration of the art design and the comic panels, there is little to enjoy in this game. I would much rather play Good Cop, Bad Cop. There's a game in there. There is not a game in here. There's just a bunch of cardboard cookies and a bunch of comic panels. Sweet Existence, a Strange Planet card game. I'm glad I played someone else's copy.
Thanks. And I'm glad I didn't have to play it. But this has a positive spin. for the past 2 or 3 weeks, the people that Eric played a game with, I've introduced them to many games, and some of them have been bad. And every time they go, well, it wasn't as bad as Sweet Existence.
Well, I'm glad. It's good to have a benchmark.
That's me. The next game is So Clover. Eric, did you play this one when you were here, or did I show it to you?
I haven't seen this one.
All right, so Clover is from the folks who made Last Word, Repos production. So Clover is a game that comes with these big clover boards. They're plastic clover boards, and on each one has 4 holes. And you're going to take cards from a deck of cards that have 4 words around the outside of them. They could be anything like desert, president, sewing, whatever it might be. And you're going to randomly put these 4 cards onto these holes. When you do so, they form a square. So each player is going to take 4 random cards. They're not going to show anybody else, and they're going to have a square. And on the outside of this square are 2 words from each side of 2 of the smaller squares. So these 4 square cards create a bigger square.
Okay.
So on the outside, you have 2 words on all 4 sides. You then write a clue on the clover leaf that you think relates those 2 words in some way. So if it says desert and sewing, I don't even know what I would write there. Maybe I would write needle, but I don't know how that refers to desert. But I would write something. So everyone writes 4 words. Once they've done that, you take the cards off your board, and one at a time, it's another cooperative game, we mix those cards up, and we throw a 5th random card in, and then reveal them. And then everybody else has to sit there and try to put these cards back on in the same way they were randomly put on.
Nice.
And it's really fun. Again, this one is really similar in a lot of ways to Mystic Paths. Again, you say, well, these 2 words, and sometimes that 5th, these 2 words match this side, but sometimes that 5th card that you flip over fits perfectly with one of your clues, which is really annoying. I'll put like military because there was a card out there that said like helmet.
Right.
And then we turn over a card and it says army on one of the 4 sides. And I'm like, oh, my word. So when this happens, so everyone puts the 4 cards in the way they think they are. Then they're like, okay, we got it. Then the person whose clover it is doesn't say anything. They just take off the cards that are wrong, whether they're in the wrong position or the wrong cards.
Okay.
Unless everybody's right, in which case you score more points. Again, right. I don't care about the points, But, and then everyone gets one last chance. All right, well, these 3 cards were right. So we only need to get the 1 card. Maybe it was the wrong way. Maybe it's the wrong card. And that's it. And you go through each person one at a time. And then you see how many points you score. And I don't even know what the points mean. It's just like Just One. I never play Just One with the points. I just play until we get bored. So Clover is a really good sequel, and I think a lot of people are going to like it.
Huh. Yeah, I think I've seen pictures floating around of this one. It looked interesting. I didn't understand how it worked, and now I know.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So those are 3 good party games, and honestly, if there's 3 party games in a year, we're doing okay.
Yeah.
3 good party games in a week. Well, it's not really a week. I mean, I just stuck them all in the same week, but still.
So Clover sounds like that would work well for a stream. That would work well on Dice Tower Tonight, I think.
Yeah, it would, because you could do it on your own and just show the board to everybody.
Right.
Yeah, it would work really well for streaming.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, let's go to Japan.
3, 2, 1, go.
It's time for Game Tech with Geoff Engelstein, where we find out how games really work.
The 2020 Tokyo Olympics just ended, and while there's plenty of important concerns over the Olympics in general, and these Olympics in particular, today I'd like to just do a quick run through 5 stories that I think board game devotees will find intriguing. So, without further ado, let's launch into the Game Tech Pentathlon. Story number 1. When you think of fencing, you think of swashbuckling, swords blazing, fancy footwork, and quick action. But fencing had a problem a few years ago. Too many matches had fencers just standing there staring at each other. It was, in a word, boring, which is not a word you want applied to your sport. Why were fencers doing this? There were many reasons, but the two biggies were that attacking opened you up to a counterattack, and many fencers preferred countering to initiating. And in some tournament structures, you were better off playing it safe and not giving up any points. That was more important than actually scoring points. And regardless of the reasons, turtling, as we call it in conflict games, became the best strategy way too often. So the fencing powers that be responded by changing the rules last year, and this was the first Olympics that included them. Here are the changes. If there are no touches within 60 seconds, penalties are handed out. If the fencers are tied, they are both given a penalty. And if they get too many penalties, they in essence can both be awarded a loss for the match, and ultimately they can be disqualified from the overall tournament. However, and this is an interesting bit of game design here, if the players are not tied, the player who is behind is awarded the penalty, not the leader. So if you get ahead, you get the advantage that you can play defensively. The other player must come after you or be penalized. It's a cute and simple change, and definitely encourages aggressive play right from the start. And it worked. Olympic fencing was much more dynamic, and there were more upsets as players who normally are so much better at defense had to come out fighting. Story number 2. A number of records were set in track and field. Some of that can be attributed to improvements due to new sneaker technology from Nike. And personally, I think equipment should be standardized at some level. I don't think it's fair that some teams have access to better tech, whether it's sneakers or bathing suits. However, another interesting point is that the track itself was constructed from new materials, and the springiness contributed to faster times. Now, personally, I think this is where it gets interesting. In one sense, it is literally the definition of a level playing field, since everyone's running on the same track. On the other hand, if you're keeping track of records, shouldn't there be some type of baseline performance? Is it fair to compare these records with others on different surfaces? Story number 3. Let's stay with track and field for this one. In the high jump this year, 2 competitors, one from Italy and one from Qatar, cleared 2.37 meters with no misses. However, both missed 2.39 meters, and the event was tied. Normally, this would be resolved with a jump-off to determine the winner, but there was also the option to share the gold medal, which they both agreed to. Now, I read some complaints from people that, quote, true competitors wouldn't want to end in a tie, and the point of the Olympics is to determine the best in the world. Now, I've talked about tie games in prior game techs and how in board games, some people really don't like games that end in ties, but also this does tend to be cultural. Some cultures are perfectly happy with ties and don't require the elaborate tiebreakers that designers often build into games. Story number 4. New to the Olympics this year was the sport of sport climbing. It consisted of 3 events: speed climbing, where you try to get to the top of a fixed course as quickly as possible; bouldering, where you climb a fixed wall as many times as you can in 4 minutes; and lead, where you just climb as high as you can. Now, in addition to the winners for each of the individual events, medals were awarded for overall performance. And the way the overall scoring was calculated was somewhat controversial. And by somewhat controversial, I mean that everybody hated it. So the way that it worked was that you took your 3 places for the 3 events and multiplied them together. So if you finished a 2nd place in speed, 3rd place in bouldering, and 5th place in lead, your score was 2 times 3 times 5, which is 30. And the climber with the lowest score was the winner. The problem with this system is that multiplying by 1 is way, way better than multiplying by 2. So if you didn't finish in first in one of the 3 events, you were basically out of the overall competition, which doesn't make it much of an overall competition. So if they'd asked me to help them design the scoring system, and they really wanted to stick with this multiplication idea, it should be something like each event counts as your position plus 2. So if you finished in first, you would multiply by 3. In second, you would multiply by 4. That's a much smaller delta and would be a better judge of the overall performance. In fact, you can, the more you add to this, instead of your place plus 2, if you do place plus 3, place plus 4, each time you increase how much you add by, it's going to smooth things out even more and make kind of the overall sum of your positions more important. So it's an interesting way that you can kind of balance that whole thing. Story number 5. A study has shown that athletes that win gold medals are happiest, but those that win bronze medals are happier than those that win silver. It is speculated that the silver winners are comparing themselves to gold, it could have been them, which diminishes their happiness, while those who get a bronze medal compare themselves not to the winners, but to those who finish fourth, who get nothing. And so they're happier. Consider that when playing a 4-player game. Maybe third place is better than second. Pentathlon complete. This is Geoff Engelstein with Game Tech.
I'm really interested in the changes here. I think that's a fascinating thing to do with games. I especially like changing the fencing to make it better, right? To make the game more interesting.
Oh, so like you're not seeing the behavior that you want to see, and so you make a switch, and then, yeah, if it works, it's great. Sometimes they make a change like that, and it doesn't work.
This happens a lot. Well, I mean, if it doesn't work, then switch it back. But this happens a lot in game design.
Right.
I mean, like when you go back to, let's say, Axis and Allies. In Axis and Allies, clearly it's better. The original game of Axis and Allies, it was clearly better to defend than it was to attack. So when Mike Selinker was changing the game or modifying the revised version, he made tanks slightly better on the defense, which seems weird because then you're like, well, why would you not? It wouldn't make defense better. Here's the thing. Tanks rolled a 3 or less to hit on the attack and a 2 and a 1 or less on the defense. And the infantry rolled a 2 or less on the defense. So it was better to buy infantry just defend against tanks because they were cheaper. And so he made the tanks better on defense, so it made it worth buying tanks, and therefore more attacks happened because of that.
Huh.
Anyhow, the other thing that worries me more, I'm a big baseball fan, and I like the statistics, but you can't compare modern stuff to early stuff sometimes because it's not the same. There was a half season here,
right,
or the seasons used to be shorter, so hitting more home runs is going to happen now because there's more. Or it's harder to have a good batting average these days because pitchers pitch so fast. They've just gotten better.
Right. So you can't compare the statistics. But really, I think that plays into the strengths of sports, which is having an argument as to who is better.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're still going to have those arguments. But whatever. Either way, it's very interesting. Thanks, Geoff. I love hearing stuff about the Olympics.
Support for the Dice Tower comes from TheOp, which is a great source for party games. They've got a wonderful collection of games that can bring any group together. From the well-known party game Telestrations, which is the telephone game sketched out, Telestrations After Dark, which is the adult version, to favorites like Blank Slate, Tapple, and you can't forget the Party Game of the Year winner from the Dice Tower Awards, Hues and Cues. TheOp has a game for every type of gamer and occasion. Grab a copy for your next summer gathering. You'll be sure to laugh the night away. Available now at TheOp.games or your local game store today. And an exclusive for Dice Tower listeners, 10% off your entire purchase at TheOp.games. It's available for all games, puzzles, and accessories. Free shipping available on purchases of $49 or more. This is available for U.S. residents only. All you have to do is enter the code DICETOWER, all one word, at checkout at TheOp.games. Questions. Lance says, you and Eric both have children that play games, and I have heard you mention that one or more of your children do not, and Eric has mentioned having some trouble getting his kiddos interested at times. What do you think some of the negative and positive aspects are of having your children participate in your hobby in general? Also, what about gaming specifically? Is it a hobby that is attractive to kids in a way that other hobbies might not be?
Well,
that's a broad topic.
Yeah. Man, I don't know what to think about this one. I mean, kids like everything or nothing. And they'll like something one day and won't like it the next day, as noted by all the birthday presents they swore they would love forever.
Oh, yes.
And I've just gotten used to that sort of thing happening. Negative and positive. Honestly, there's nothing positive. I really think, and I've taught teacher seminars on this, and I've gone to homeschool conventions. Look, teaching kids board games will help them. It helps them function with other people.
Sure.
It helps them negotiate. There's so many positive benefits to it. I don't even have to, it's just positive. And in a family setting, it's a positive family thing. Negative, it's the same negative as anything else. But the main thing is, who cares? I keep saying this all the time. I feel like I'm shouting at the wall. Who cares? Your kids might hate games. That's okay, because you're going to hate some of the stuff they like. I really try to watch anime with my daughters. I hate it. Not all of it. There's some anime that I thought was fine, but so much of it I hate. I'm like, why is that protagonist crying the whole time? Why does no one slap that person? They just keep screaming and yelling, and they're like, oh, it's just the way it is. Or else, it's funny, and we have a good time talking about this. I just don't like it, but that's okay. It's okay that they like something I don't like, and it's okay if they don't like games. I have 7 children. A little more than half of them like gaming. That's pretty good odds, actually, but that's okay. I don't love the ones who love gaming more than the other ones. And so, yes, you should game with your kids. You should force them to play games sometimes because it's a good family activity. But sometimes it ain't going to work. And I'm sorry, video games are popular. They are. My kids like to game. But 9 times out of 10, they'll pick a video game over board games. All of them, even the ones who like gaming. And what am I supposed to say? I can say no, and sometimes I do, but not always.
Yes. Occasionally we do have a screen-free family game night, although not as much lately. I think after we moved, our schedules got jumbled, and we've never quite stuck a flag in a family game night. But my eldest told me something that I think really resonated, is that he likes playing games, but not new games that we don't know anything about yet. Like he doesn't want to play my review games. He wants to play a game that either he knows he likes already, or he knows that I have played before, have enjoyed, and think he will like. He's okay learning a game if it's already been proven in some way, but when it's like this big mystery, he's not really interested. And he loves going to conventions and teaching games to other people. Which has been, bringing back to Lance's question, has been one of the biggest rewards, is seeing my kids introduce games to their friends at a con. And seeing how they have taught something and how they approach getting the information across to somebody else. There's a lot of skills involved in teaching a game to other people, especially a bunch of kids, and getting them to understand and play by the rules and sort of police it and make sure it all works and make sure all the pieces get back in the box. There's a lot of skills and stuff to be proud of when that's done successfully. So that's sort of my real proud dad moment, is when I get to see that. But you just have to roll with it. Sometimes they're not in the mood to play something, and you just have to be okay with that.
You know what, though? You are right on that, though, that kids are not necessarily wanting to try every new game that comes out.
Yeah.
In fact, most people aren't.
Right, yes, no, yeah. We're an anomaly.
Now, a lot of the people who do like that are in the hobby, and many of you listeners are like that. If I say, I got a new game, several of you are like, woo, let's do it.
Let's do it.
And there's
new stuff.
Many people, though, and I suspect most people go, but what about the one we already know?
Yeah.
And I know this because NCIS is on its umpteenth season and still really popular than new edgy TV shows that will do something outside the box.
Yep.
And those shows have found their audience, but the classics work because they're comfort TV. Same thing as with comfort, playing of games.
Yeah, even in the adults in my game group, there's one guy who, when I bring out something new and he happens to be sitting there, he'll often say, so have you played this yet? And I'd be like, no, the first time. Ah. He's happy to play along, but it's, he's not always happy to have played something that's unproven. You? Yes. I think he would rather we say, yes, I love this game, you're going to like it, as opposed to, oh, we're trying something new, huh?
All right, Matthew has a couple questions. What's the difference between a CCG and an LCG?
Ooh.
Well, CCG is collectible card game. Actually, that term is barely used these days. Now they're called trading card games, TCGs.
True.
And that just means you buy a deck of cards that's randomized, although it's not always randomized. The new Magic ones are not randomized. But then you buy booster packs, and there are randomized cards. Rare, common, uncommon, legendary, whatever. LCG is a living card game, and as far as I know, Fantasy Flight is the only company who has made those, although a few other companies like AEG have done something similar. They're just not allowed to call it an LCG.
Right. That's not random. It's released in sets that are pre-designed. The content comes out still on a regular basis. You can buy more and more stuff for these games, but it is not a random assortment of cards.
Really, the only difference is the buying thing. So in the LCG, you buy when you buy it, you get everything that's in that pack. With a CCG or TCG, you buy it and get random stuff. But after that, the gameplays are usually similar. You take the pool of cards, you build a deck of cards, and you play against an opponent, usually, or play with an opponent if it's cooperative. Even Summoner Wars could be considered an LCG.
Yeah, you could say it. It follows that model.
LCG is more like a card game with a lot of expansions.
Yeah.
Matthew also wants to know, do you think that legacy games are now a trend in the board game industry? No. And do you think this is a genre that is here to stay in the industry? Probably.
Yeah. But no, I think the boom is over.
It's not a trend. I really do. I keep seeing people like, well, how many? Oh, everything's going to be a legacy game. I'm thinking the first legacy game came out almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And there's been like 15 total.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not counting fake legacy games like the game we talked about last week, the marble one from.
Oh, right, Crack the Code. That wasn't a legacy game. I mean, the real legacy game has permanent consequences for what you do.
And a campaign game is something different because you go through a campaign, and a campaign game you can usually reset and play over again with different things.
Right.
Or having a bunch of modules is not a legacy game, Jamie Stegmaier, either. He called Viticulture Tuscany, he called it legacy. It wasn't legacy. It was just a bunch of modules. You're supposed to play them in order. Yeah, you don't have to, though.
Okay.
But then he made Charterstone, which was a true legacy game.
Right.
But, yeah, it's going to be around, but it's very rare. In fact, I don't know of any that are in development right now. Well, I guess there's some Kickstarter ones. There's some Kickstarter stuff. But
yeah.
Not many. Now, campaign stuff, there's a lot of that. Everything is trying to be a campaign. And Alexander Pfister, is trying to stick campaigns into Euro games. I don't think it's working very well, but...
Yeah, you're talking about Newdale?
Well, not just Newdale. He did it in Maracaibo.
Yeah.
And in the new one about airships. But, again, his campaigns are like, there's 3 different cards in the deck this turn. And you're still not permanently changing it. Anyway, whatever. I'm almost anti-campaign at this point. I get it. If you're going to play a big dungeon crawler adventure game, a campaign is very enjoyable.
Well, sure.
Because you get to play this long, winding, experience that's fantastic. But sometimes I just want to pull a game out and play a single game.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to say, well, we can't because we're in the middle of a campaign in this game. So I can't play a version of this with you.
Right.
So that's why I don't think it's here to stay, because a lot of people just want to play single games. Campaign. I mean, how many legacy games have you heard about where you said, well, we played through half of it and then one person moved away?
Yeah.
Or someone got not interested anymore. I mean, I still have Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I finished. And then I started playing again with my children, and we never finished it.
Yeah. I'm still halfway through 2. And I purchased 0 and haven't even gotten a chance to play that one yet with the family. It's a commitment.
Matthew then says, are you guys asked ever to give input or help develop games, given that you review all games and would be considered experts on the subject? Well, let's start with the second half of that. Matthew, some people consider us experts, but many people consider us to be doofuses. When I say us, I mean me. People usually agree with Eric. Yes. Almost 99.99% of the time, I say no.
Right.
I have to. Just because it is a whole job. I would have to read through the game, understand it. I get asked this sometimes when I do a negative review. The publisher or designer will say, can you work with me for a while to help fix the game and make it? I'm like, I just don't really have time for that. It's a lot of work. I have high respect for developers. It's a lot of work. Yep. They should get more praise.
Similarly, the same answer would probably go toward playtesting. There are some folks who love that aspect of the hobby and being able to give feedback to the designer, get to see a brand new, fresh out of the brain of the designer game, and give feedback that you actually get to see get implemented into future versions of the game. That is a very cool, exciting aspect of the hobby. It is not one that I have the time or interest in. There's too many games that are already past that point that are published for me to play. It's just not an aspect that I have the time for.
And that's the main reason I haven't. People ask me, are you going to ever design another game? That's the main reason I haven't, because I've come up with ideas in my head. I'm like, ooh, that's a good start to a game. Maybe I should. And then I start, I might work it out a little bit in my head, and I start writing some stuff down on paper, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do all this work. And it's not something I enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. But I get that people do enjoy doing it.
Marceau has one of the age-old questions. In most cases, does a designer design the mechanics of a game first, or pick the setting or theme and then decide how to design? It probably depends on the designer and the company, but I would be interested if you have a general idea on what happens first, the mechanics or the theme setting. That might be a determination into how much theme a game has. The answer is yes. Although I really like, if you ask Geoff Engelstein this question, he often likes to say that the real answer is whether it's the experience. What experience do you want the players to have, and then build the game around that? You can go from either direction. Both are totally valid design methods, and even the same designer will come from different directions and design around one thing or the other. There isn't really a set answer for...
Well, I will say there's a set answer. I don't think how much theme a game has matters with what they start with. Because some very themed games, a good example would be Dune, the original Dune, were started as a different theme, and yet Dune is considered to be one of the most thematic games out there.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter in the final product.
Yeah, I don't care, honestly, what they start with. I just care if the game's fun or not.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's always mechanisms. I'll think of some cool thing to do, and I'm like, ooh, how will I make this work?
Yeah.
Nick says, what's the correct balance between aesthetics and accessibility in a board game? So he just got Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, and he thinks it looks better than the board game. Yes. But he says it's impossible to play. He has a visual impairment. The text is on less than 20% of the card, and the symbols are not small, but also incomplete. In the board game, you can know what a card does without reading the text. This is impossible in the card game. And Nick says, I wonder what you guys have to say about this.
Well,
I don't know, Nick, because I don't have this problem with the card game, so I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to appreciate more accessibility and readability in the game than making the board pretty. Tom will often complain that this board looks boring. Food Chain Magnate, for example. And it doesn't bother me as much because the emphasis in that one is readability of the board state and not necessarily how pretty the trees are. But there's certainly an amount of polish that can go on something and make it look nicer. The issue, of course, is when it gets in the way of the product. So there needs to be a happy medium. That's not really a definitive answer there. There is a point at which it's no longer useful and that you've made it too pretty. There are certainly some pretty boards that aren't as clear. I don't like it when a board has so much illustration that I can't tell where the spaces end anymore. But it needs to be readable.
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely agree on this, but what's going to be good for someone might not be good for someone else. So
yeah.
Who knows?
What do you think about the boards? There's a lot of Kickstarter games that'll do this, or just a board that doesn't have anything on the other side that you can flip the board over and it will have either a more illustrated or a less illustrated version, or icons or no icons on the other side of the board.
I love that.
Yeah. What game was it? Was it Barrage, I think, was one of the more recent games that did that. And
I have a hard time remember what games do it, but I always think it's great, and I always use the side that has the stuff written on it. Always.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I'd rather have the icons.
I don't care.
Sometimes it's very, very difficult. I think Barrage in particular, if you flip it over to the side that does not have the clear icons, it's all very subtle cues. There's very, very subdued arrows, or costs are based on the number of trees on the board or something like that. It's way harder to understand what the board is telling you when you're trying to play the artistic side. I far prefer playing with the icons. Just slap a big icon in the way. It doesn't bother me. Lastly, we have a question from Jeremy, another age-old question. We were in episode 717. Suzanne, Mandy, and I were discussing in the Game Pie segment about games costing $15 or less. And the comment was made, almost a trope by this point, that board gaming was an expensive hobby. I've heard this several times on the podcast. My question for you is, expensive compared to what? And then Jeremy gives examples for how much money you can spend in other regards. Like if you go out to dinner and a movie, you're paying $20 for the tickets, $20 for popcorn and drinks. If you stop for burritos beforehand, that's another $25. And then if you have to get a sitter, that's even more. So like $65 plus a sitter for one evening entertainment. For the same price, that's a main list board game title, or several if you're shopping wisely. My $25 copy of Carcassonne, purchased at a game store where I went to in 2000, was literally played hundreds of times. And then gives lots of other examples of hobbies that cost a lot more. And Jeremy's saying, yes, this is a cost-effective hobby, even if it can be an expensive one. You can spend a lot of money in this hobby, and I think that's more the point we were making in episode 717, is that you can spend a lot of money or feel like you need to spend a lot of money in this hobby to really jump in. And we were highlighting games that didn't require you to spend as much money to do that. And I think that's where that comes from. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. And we don't want to assume that everyone who loves board games has the ability to go all in on the latest Kickstarter. I certainly avoid that sort of activity a lot. And so I think that's where the comment that board gaming is expensive comes from.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of weird. I mean, in one sense, board gaming can be a free hobby for you if you have a friend who buys a lot of games.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's fine. I mean, you should probably buy snacks or something once in a while. But
you should, yes.
Well, no, again, you might, if you have like no money,
yeah,
then come to my house and play games with me.
There you go.
I'll pay for your hobby.
Yes.
Right. And if I can afford to do that, I should, help people out who can't. But so, yes, it can go from free to the people who you listen to, different podcasters and people like us. You'll hear me say, I back this, I back that. Well, yes, but I'm also backing it for the Dice Tower. But even beyond that, you'll see people on Facebook all the time going, oh, yes, I'm currently backing 200 projects. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
This thing can get super expensive, especially since publishers are realizing people are willing to spend gazooks of money on board games.
That's a technical term, gazooks.
It is. Jeff Engelstein said so. It is. You can pay vast amounts of money. And you want to, because they'll say this game costs $50. But the Ultra Pledge and the Super Ultra, then there's the Deluxe Super Ultra, and then the blah, blah, and eventually there's a $400 pledge. At that point, it's not a cheap hobby anymore.
Yeah.
So it's what you make it to be. And, like some of your examples you used here, Jeremy, you said golf. Now, golf is a pricey hobby. But football is not a pricey hobby because you don't actually have to go to the game.
Right.
Yes, going to an NFL game is expensive, but you could also watch it on TV, and that is not expensive.
So
You could join fantasy football leagues for free online.
Yep. And there's ways to experience many of these hobbies in less expensive ways, too. So there's a gradient for sure. And one other monkey wrench that gets thrown in here is if you're spending a lot of money and then not playing the games, then the ratio goes way down, too.
And then a lot of it also depends on what can you afford. I don't think board gaming is out of most people's reach in America. I'm speaking from an American perspective. You could buy a couple games a year.
Sure.
In fact, it's cheaper than eating out. Most people can eat out a couple times a year, whatever. And if you did that, you could buy a couple board games instead. That's up to you. But most people also can't afford to buy hundreds of games. And I fear some people go into debt buying all these games.
Right.
So, yes, I think the hobby is more expensive than it used to be. The games are much better nowadays, but they're also much more expensive.
Sure.
I mean, if Eric says, we'll say, I'll look at a Kickstarter and go, it's $40. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
We didn't used to say that about a $40 game.
Yeah.
Now, inflation is involved for sure, but it's going to get worse too. You're at the precipice right here of seeing a major shift in board games because shipping and everything else is catching up.
Yes.
And game prices are already going up. I'm already seeing it happen. So
now it's hearing some interesting issues of cardboard supply, too, is also an issue all of a sudden. Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
Well,
oh, boy.
Let's say you are in the market for picking one or two of those games a year. If only there were some sort of globally recognized award that could sort of point you toward a great family game in a particular year.
We are the masters of the unforced segue.
It's a Dice Tower Top 10!
The Dice Tower's Top 10 list is brought to you by Game Nerds at GameNerdZ.com.
All right, so first of all, we should talk about what are we talking about here.
What are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about our favorite Spiel des Jahres winners. Now, the Spiel des Jahres is an award from Germany, and it means Game of the Year. It's pretty simple, right? Game of the Year. It's an award for board and card games. It started in 1978. There is a committee of actual real journalists, like not YouTubers.
Yes.
I know. YouTubers.
Yeah,
are real
game journalism
whatever.
in Germany is very different.
Right. So there's a lot of different people. They form a committee. They play a lot of different copies of games, and they pick one each year to be the Game of the Year. Now, the award has changed. When it first came out, there was a bunch of games that they nominated. Then they picked one. And as time has gone by, they've changed the process. For a while, they were nominating 5 games and picking one. Nowadays, they nominate 3. But they also have a spin-off called the Kenner Spiel, which started several years ago, which is like the gamer game of the year.
The
And they also have
Connoisseur's Game of the Year is the official title.
That's true. I just can't pronounce connoisseur. And there's also a children's game award. The children's
Kinderspiel.
game award. The Kinderspiel has been around. I'm trying to look here. That's been around since '89.
Yeah.
It's been around for a while. And this one gets no buzz at all in America, but you will do no wrong buying your kids a game off this list.
Correct.
If you're not sure a game to buy your kids, now many of these games only showed up in Germany, unfortunately.
For the Kinder,
many
very much so, yes.
For the Kinderspiel, yes. But if you find one and play it with your kids, they will enjoy it. Straight up. I feel very confident about that. The Connoisseur's Game of the Year can range from middleweight. Well, they're middleweight games. They're not heavy games.
Yeah.
For some people, they might be heavy games. Just recently, they announced the winner, which was Paleo. Won that in 2021, and that's now a decade old. It started in 2011. Seven Wonders was the first one to win that.
Yeah, for a while, the Spiel des Jahres was trending toward heavier games. In the mid-'90s, We were seeing some
it was a really weird thing.
Very heavier, much heavier games, and I think we'll probably talk about a few of them. And then the connoisseur gamers, the board game geek people, were getting more and more upset at Spiel des Jahres winners because they were too light. They're too much of a family game, but it's a family game award. It's designed.
I would argue that this first started in the year 2002, when Villa Paletti beat Puerto Rico.
And
everyone went berserk.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Puerto Rico is not necessarily a family game. Villa Paletti is like a Jenga-style game.
Yeah. And that arguing sort of ended once the Kennerspiel Award came along, and, they're still arguing about whether games fit into those categories. But there's less of the argument over that shouldn't have won the Spiel des Jahres because there's still the Kennerspiel Award that can sort of reward some of those more complex games.
They were also starting to award special awards at different points.
Yep.
They did a beautiful game, a recommended game. They gave a special prize a few years ago to Pandemic Legacy Season 2.
Yep.
And in 2008, they started doing complex games. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They did that 2 years in a row. 2006, they did Kalis. In 2008, they did Agricola. And then, well, we'll talk about the game. It's on our top 10 list. The game that I think changed how they did the awards. Nowadays, I'm kind of meh on these myself on a personal level because I think the complexity for them has dropped down to about as low as you can get, which is not a bad thing per se. It's just that I don't get excited about the award.
I'm far more interested in the Kennerspiel winner these days. That's far more interesting to me, that particular title. But these are, again, if you're looking for something for the family, these are all strong titles.
Also, that turning point, and I'll tell you what year, 2009.
Oh,
was the year that turned it in two ways, and we'll talk about one of those ways later on. But starting in 2009 and going till today, I was able to play almost all the games before the award was announced. It didn't used to be that way.
That's very true.
They used to announce the game, and I was like, what is this game?
Yeah. You'd have to hunt them down and get them shipped in.
Mississippi Queen they're talking about. What is this? Yeah. This Turn-In Taxis. I never heard of it. Nowadays, I'm like, oh, yes, I know that game because it's usually gotten some buzz. And that's mostly just because here in America, we're starting to catch up to Germany.
Yeah.
I want to be clear that my top 10 here is not the games I think are the most deserving winners, because that would be a really easy list. And also, you'll just read Eric's list.
Okay.
No. You have a lot of them on it that I would consider to be deserving winners. I'm picking my personal favorites. That's all.
Yep. But I think that's I must sync well with the committee because that was also my criteria.
Well, sure. And no, I'm not saying it's not. I'll talk about some of those deserving winners, and specifically, there's a couple there that I didn't put on my list that I think certainly deserve to win the award. They're just not in my 10 favorite. That's all.
Gotcha.
All right, let's get started.
Number 10.
We're going to kick things off with one of those more complex titles for sure. This is Torres, the action point selection game where you're building towers. You've got, I think, 5 actions on a turn. And you're moving little knights around, building up these towers, getting the knights to stand on higher and higher levels, scoring points for doing so. It is a complex game because not only are you spending these action points to do this, you have master cards that you are, breaking the rules and trying to maneuver your characters around and spawn new ones, and it's a thinky game, and not one that you would necessarily think of as a family one, but it is also a very strong thinky game. I love the puzzle of Torres. My number 10.
I think it's in the top 2 of the complex games that have been nominated. I think there's 3 games total that have been clearly more complex than the rest, and all 3 are on our list, so we'll get to them. But Torres is one of them.
Cool.
I like Torres, but okay. It's so abstract, though. And it's so thinky. The analysis paralysis possibilities in it are immense.
Yes. There's a lot of staring at the board.
There's a reason I feel like this is a game that is dated Like, how many action points did you get in it? Is it 8? 6? I don't remember how many it is.
In Torres, it's 5, I think.
And 5. Well, you know what? That's like 3 too many. Nowadays, I mean, very few games give you more than 4 actions you can take on your turn.
Yeah.
Because it just really slows the game down. I'm like, I have 5 actions. I have 8 actions. That was Kramer and Kiesling thing.
Yep.
So my number 10 is one of the older winners from 1983, and that is Scotland Yard. Now, I just recently played this game with my kids. I also played it with my game group. Was like a back-to-back thing. I really like this game, where Mr. X is hiding from 5 detectives chasing him across London as they pay tickets. There are better one-verse-all hidden deduction games now, but there are very few ones that are as smooth as Scotland Yard is. So that was an easy choice for me, Scotland Yard.
Number 9.
My number 9 is Colt Express. A game with tremendous table presence. You've got this cool cardboard train. You're moving your characters around trying to steal gold, treasure, trying to beat up the other players. And it's all this hidden programmed movement. Sometimes you have to play the cards face down because you go through a tunnel. And you are sort of programming your character, and sometimes you swing and miss because no one's standing there anymore. It is joyous fun with some amazing table presence. Colt Express, number 9.
I like Colt Express fine. It just didn't make my top 10, but it's fun. It's a little fiddly. Although I really like the Super Colt Express or Mini Colt Express. It's like a really small card game. That does the same thing. Think of it as my Omega Virus intro.
Oh, there you go.
My number 9 is higher on Eric's list. I think it is. But, well, sort of. I'm sure it is.
Number 8.
Number 8 is Alhambra, a lovely tile-laying and area majority game. This was one of the first Spiel des Jahres winners I think I purchased before it won. And I felt so happy because I had it. Like, hey, the game I own won the award. A lovely game about collecting different currencies and then spending them on the tiles and trying to build the wall so that it reaches around your terrain, but that limits your tile possibilities. I'm not a big fan of the expansions. There's tons of them for this game, but I like just straight up original base game Alhambra, my number 8.
How many of these expansions have you played?
Not many.
Oh, there's really good ones. So there's a channel out there called The Dice Tower, which has reviewed all 20 of the expansions that come in the big box.
Oh,
Alhambra.
interesting.
The coins are fantastic. There are some clunky expansions for sure, but there's some good ones. I like this one a lot, especially the big box version. My number 8 is a racing game, and it's another early one from 92, Reifenbreit. Now, this one is one of the few games that has won the Spiel des Jahres that I believe has never had an English release.
True.
And I was like, someone should bring it over from Germany. And then every time Eric and I go to Germany, to the Spiel Fair in Essen, and we go to the used stands, you can find copies of this for like 10
Stacks
euros.
of them.
Stacks everywhere.
Yes.
It's oversaturated in the German market.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep.
Oh, man. It's a fun bicycle racing game where you roll and move. You roll 2 dice, and that's how far a bicycle moves. But each of your bikes, you have 4 bikes, so that's fun. You can draft other bikes. You have to say, well, Eric rolls a 7. I'm right behind him. I'm like, well, I could move 7 too. Or should I try to roll, and this will be the turn I pass him?
Yeah.
And then you also have a card that you can substitute for dice. So each of your bikers has some cards. Like I might have 2 5 cards for a bike. And I'm like, you know what? I'm playing both those cards. I'm moving 10. And nobody can draft me this turn.
Yep.
It's not a complex game, but again, it's just such a fun, simple racing game. I love it. Reifenbreit.
Yeah, I was very close to putting this on my top 10 as well. It is a very fun game, and it does seem criminal that it has not seen an English release, because you do have to, if you get the translation, you've got to get the translation of the rules, and I think there's a couple of cards that you need to make sure you understand how they work.
Oh, mine are paste ups, actually.
There you go.
Paste them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but I really don't think it would sell well. There's a lot of racing games in America as it is. We have some really, I mean, if I was going to print Reifenbreit, why would I do that? I mean, what's to make you play that over Justin's game? Downforce.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Right? There's a lot of crossover there. Downforce is already doing a lot of the same things. It would be a hard market to break into.
Right, but I mean, Downforce is a restoration of an older title, so Reifenbreite would.
I hope Justin's listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
Number 7.
Number 7 was Tom's number 9. That is Carcassonne. The tile-laying classic where you're building these castles and putting your meeples on there to claim different sections, horning in on somebody else's castle to steal some points from them. It's delicious simplicity. Even the farmer scoring is not that complicated. Remember how we used to like figure out ways to play without the farmers when you were teaching this to people? And for a long time, we were very concerned about teaching the farmer scoring. I don't think it's that complicated.
Well, there's some problems with farmers. They don't come back, so that confuses people.
Yeah, okay.
And there's like 4 different ways that farmers can score, depending on what version of the rules you have.
That is very true.
So, in fact, if I was teaching Carcassonne right now, I would have to pull the rules out to make sure I was teaching the same way the rules said.
Yeah, which one? And I think weren't there a couple of different ways that they come on and off the board or something like that too. Yeah, the scoring is different in each version.
Now, Carcassonne is in the top 3 or 4, maybe, popular games that's come out of the Spiel des Jahres.
Sure.
Most Spiel des Jahres games sell in the millions. Or not in the millions, I'm sorry, in the hundreds of thousands. But some hit millions.
Yep.
Carcassonne is one of those. The other ones that we've mentioned, maybe Scotland Yard has, but Taurus, Cold Express, Alhambra, Reifenbreite, they did not reach the level that Carcassonne did.
Sure. Carcassonne's a huge hit.
It really is. It spawned a lot of expansions to the point where we joke about those expansions.
Right.
Many spinoffs. I think there's like 6 or 7 or more spinoffs. There's a lot of Carcassonne out there, and for good reason. It's a fun game. And if you think it's too simple, you can add in some expansions. Yeah. Those new maps, I'm loving those. There's these new big maps of like cities or areas, and they're like just big rollout maps. You put them on a table, and there's different starting spots on them and tiles that are already built on them, and then they have special rules. So you're actually building like an area near Paris or London.
Huh.
Yeah, I really love them.
Cool.
My number 7 is Camel Up. Now, when Camel Up won the award, I was pretty annoyed because it went up against Concept and Splendor.
Yes.
And I was like, how did Splendor not win this? Because at the time, Splendor was so hot. We were constantly playing Splendor all over the place. Everyone.
Yeah.
Every time I went to Game Group, everybody played Splendor. Splendor. Here's the thing. I like Splendor more than Camel Up, except now. In 2021, I like Camel Up better. Now, part of this is they made a nice new second edition of it. But even before that, I played it and I was like, wow. I kind of went into it with an attitude of, is this better than Splendor? But it's such a fun racing game. Actually, this is the second racing game on my list. But it's silly. You're betting on camels to win or lose. It has a fun pyramid that doubles as a dice ejector tower sort of thing. I find it to be really fun. Camel Up.
Number 6.
We've already mentioned my number 6 a little bit earlier in the show. That is Codenames. This is the word game that does work best when you have 3 or 4 people on a team and you're trying to get your teammates to guess several words from an array of words and avoid not only your opponent's words, but also the assassin word that will lose you the game immediately. It's very thinky. It has shades of password, but with some cool combinations. You're trying to be as efficient as possible and get lots of words across with just a few clues and with just a single word. I love the thinky puzzle of Codenames, number 6.
This is another one of the mega hits that came from the Spiel des Jahres for sure. CG, I mean, again, you can see the number of code names that exist. It's already in the millions.
Yeah, plus all the spin-offs. I almost bought a Simpsons version the other day.
Yeah, I think in the Dice Tower library we have, 5 different versions. There's a lot. My number 6 is from 1994, Manhattan. Now, I mentioned Puerto Rico earlier. Andreas Seaforth, who designed that, had already designed a winner Manhattan. This one doesn't get as much love as the other ones, but it's one of the first games ever made that was like, let's stack buildings and tiles and try to build towers. It was like making skyscrapers, and that's what it was. And it was very interactive. You're stacking your buildings on top of other people's. It's a silly, quick, fast game that is still in print at somewhere level at all points, years later. It wasn't nearly as big as some of the other Spiel des Jahres winners, but it's one that I liked a lot, and it's really easy to teach new people. So that's Manhattan.
Number 5.
My number 5 is the one I'm probably most surprised didn't make Tom's list. That's Azul. This is the tile-laying game, pattern-matching game, where you're collecting these tiles from trays in the center of the board, drafting them, and then adding them to your patterned array, trying to score points as efficiently as possible and not waste tiles. Don't let them fall on the floor. It's a huge family hit, definitely a hit in my family. My mom really, really enjoys Azul, and just a deliciously produced game, too. Those tiles are so much fun to play with and hold and shuffle around. Azul, number 5.
I like Azul, just not as much as everybody else, I guess.
Sure.
I like both of the sequels better than the original. I thought it was fine. It just didn't make my top 10.
Yeah.
And this is the last of it's the latest mega hit. So this was in 2018, and we have Azul, then Just One, then Pictures, and Micro Macro. Well, Just One has done fairly well. Pictures,
yeah.
I haven't heard much of that one at all. Micro Macro, it's too new to tell. But Azul, millions already. And they just announced this because Azul was sold to Asmodee when they bought Plan B. And they were like, we bought Plan B and Azul. We don't care about anything else. We got Azul. So, also, Azul is kind of a big deal because for years, I knew Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling. And now Michael Kiesling did a game by himself.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, that Torres, which Eric mentioned is number 10, that was half done by Michael Kiesling.
Yeah.
And then now he's back making his own games. It's pretty cool. My number 5 is higher on Eric's list, so we'll get there if we match.
Number 4.
Number 4 is the classic Catan.
The biggest of all the winners of the Spiel des Jahres.
I mean, it's easy to sort of forget how big Catan is. Even today, in the last month or so, I've had 2 people suggest Catan to me. We went to check out a local game store that ended up not having any board games. It was all trading card games. But when the clerk heard me say we're interested in board games, somebody else from the store came over and's like, "Oh, have you played Settlers of Catan? Because that's a great game. I really, really like it." And I'm like, "Yeah, Catan's great." And I was talking with somebody who wasn't a board gamer at all, but she said her daughter played, and she plays this game called Catan. Like, this has such a footprint that I have to give it a lot of credit just for that, for having such a great reach. It's also a lovely game of resource collection and trading and trying to build and expand your network, and it's got that tension of longest road and biggest army and all of that. It's a lovely game. Number 4, Catan.
Yeah, this one is, for me, it's faded a bit on a personal level, but I will never, ever dispute how important this game is and how it seems like still once a month or so I see someone online going, "I discovered this new name, Catan." This new game. In fact, we just watched a TV show. What was it? Schmigadoon.
Oh, they play Catan in Schmigadoon?
No, they mentioned it.
Oh.
At one point, she said something like, "You did this when we played Settlers of Catan." And I was like, "Aha, I know that game." And that's like a new thing. I'm surprised you even watch it, Eric. It's about musicals.
I don't have Apple Plus. I need to. I need to
for
buy a new iDevice because they give you like a year for free or something.
Yeah, as I say, just do it and then just quick binge it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like the game. It's done well, and of all, like I said, of all of them, there's a close second behind Catan, which we'll get to in a bit, that has probably sold almost as much as Catan at this point. But Catan changed the world, and that's not an exaggeration.
No, it for the board gaming world, for sure.
Now, Eric said he was surprised that number 5 wasn't on my list. I'm surprised my number 4 is not on his.
It was close.
And that's Dixit. This came out in 2010. This was the year that they decided They didn't give out any special awards, but this was the last year they had a single award. They went to the double award the year after. Dixit is a party game for smart people. Now, that sounds egotistical, and I don't mean it to be that way. But there's a lot of party games where you can sit there and just, like apples, and throw a card out in the middle of the table. You don't even have to try. Just throw a card out, and you might win. Dixit requires a little bit more thought and lets you do really clever things. Now, there are a lot of clever party games out there nowadays. Eric already mentioned code names, and we mentioned a lot in our overviews. And I think Dixit has a lot to do with that. Dixit made it so it's simple, it's easy to play, but this party game in which I put out a card, give a clue about it, and then we mix them up and everyone else throws one and we try to figure out which one's mine. I think this one also had a big effect on how party games were made.
Yes. Well, and there have been several similar designs since then. Muse and Mysterium and, games where you are trying to interpret the art on a card in a way that's advantageous to your team or your group or something like that. And it really did spawn this artistic appreciation game, I guess. Very strong game. I came very close. This is probably my 11. And unique. I mean, at the time, it was the first time we were seeing this sort of gameplay. It felt very, very fresh.
Yeah, I like it a lot. Dixit.
Number 3.
Moving on to my number 3. This was Tom's number 5, and he mentioned it just a little bit as one of the close to mega sellers. I think a lot of people are buying Just One. The game
but you can tell when a game is like everywhere, right?
Yeah, we're not quite there yet for Just One. It's a party word game, a cooperative word game where you're trying to get everybody to guess a word by giving a one-word clue. But if you match a clue with any of the other teammates, those clues don't get shown to the person who's guessing. So you have to be very suggestive of what you're trying to do, but not too obvious because you'll collide with somebody else and not actually get to show that information. And some pretty hilarious moments can happen when everybody ends up putting the same word down and then you end up with one word that's way off in left field and you can't get the word from that, that's for sure. Just One is a lovely word game experience. Number 3.
I love it. Great game. And like I said, the new So Clover feels similar to it. But Just One is one of the few games that I highly doubt there's anyone in the world who would dislike it, maybe. When I said I mean like non-gamers. So like I think I could take it to somebody, take it to any party, pull out Just One, say, we're playing this game, and people would enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
My number 3 is the second most complex game after Taurus. That's El Grande.
Yes.
From 1996. This one was like, after Catan won in 95, then they're like, all right, well, people can handle that. Here's El Grande. An area control game, which honestly isn't that complex compared to modern control games, but compared to every other game in the Spiel des Jahres. There's a lot going on in it. I love this game, though. It is very much in your face. It is the most straightforward area control game there is, as you try to control different spots in Spain. And you are using some cards, and drafting cards, and using your caballeros to put them out on the board. It does not look fantastic, but it is very fun to play. El Grande.
It is a lovely game. It's just faded for me. I'm not really playing as many of those area control games, but it is definitely a classic and on the more complex side of the Spiel des Jahres.
Number 2.
We synced up for our number 2 with Ticket to Ride, the lovely train game that is a great entry point for lots of families getting into board gaming. I've given Ticket to Ride as a gift to many, many people. Very streamlined gameplay, simple set collection game with some delicious tension. It is frustrating as all get out when somebody places on a route that you didn't even think they needed, but you're one way into a particular city that you really needed to get to.
Yeah, this is my number 2 also. 2004, and this is the second biggest one after Catan. For a while, it was Carcassonne, I think, was the second biggest one, but Ticket to Ride has surpassed it. Ticket to Ride also was one of the games that got people to play on electronic devices. Because Days of Wonder did a good job bringing it to that market too. And it's the first game I think I've ever played on Alexa. And yeah, it's one of the few games I think Ticket to Ride does a better job, even in its base game, at holding a gamer in than Catan is.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
I mean, I think they're both great games to introduce people to the hobby, but I think Ticket to Ride, I'll play with my wife, and we played a gazillion different games, and I could still play Ticket to Ride. And, in fact, me and Z, we play games. We were on a plane, and we played Ticket to Ride.
Yeah.
Back and forth. So that's our number 2s, Ticket to Ride.
And finally, number 1.
And we synced up for our number 1 as well. In fact,
What?
I think I played this for the first time. No, I actually played it right before I saw you, but the first time you and I met in person, Tom, was when they were releasing Dominion Intrigue at Origins. And we got to play that amidst, I think it was right about the time that they were nominated or were about to win when Dominion Intrigue came out. And we got to play those new cards for the first time when you and I were together for the first time. Dominion
is so exciting. I remember that.
It was. Everyone's just like, oh man, these are so different, and the new combinations. The deck building classic, where you're acquiring cards into your deck, getting scoring cards, trying not to clog things up, being as efficient as possible with a new set of kingdom cards every time you play. It spawned an entire genre of gaming. As well as a whole bunch of expansions for Dominion itself with so many options for Kingdom cards every time you play.
I'm also confident that it drove the committee crazy because it was not that simple, but it was also not that complex.
Yep.
And this was the game I am convinced caused them to split off. This would have definitely won the Kenner Spiel.
It would have won the Kenner Spiel, yeah. And somebody on the committee finally said, you know what? I'm sick of having this argument whether we go for the really good complex game or the really good easy game. Let's just do 2 awards.
And you know what? That's an interesting thing because if Dominion, if the Kenner Spiel had been out in 2009 and Dominion had won the Kenner Spiel, you know what would have won the Spiel? Pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
Because Pandemic, in my opinion, is the biggest superstar game that never won the Spiel des Jahres.
Didn't win the Spiel, yeah.
But that's because it went up against Dominion.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do? It was a weird thing. There's also Fitz, Finca, and Fauna, but none of them had a chance. No one plays Fitz anymore, and Fauna and Finca. But anyway, yeah, it's interesting to me how that worked out. But I mean, Pandemic's doing okay.
It's doing really all right, yeah.
But if it had won the Spiel, I think it might have come to the forefront faster. But that was a year, 2009, for sure. Well, those are our favorite, folks. We don't have anything from the People's Choice, but I'm pretty sure they would be very similar to our lists. I'm pretty sure Dominion would win and Ticket to Ride would be right after that.
I was surprised that you put Ticket to Ride in number 2. I thought that would have been your number 1 for this one.
I just love Dominion.
Yeah. I'm not arguing. I mean, I put it where it is.
I go back and forth, right? But Dominion intrigues me, and I don't know. Also, I need to get on this Dominion app thing. I just need to get on that.
Oh yeah, I've been playing that. It's a good time.
Alrighty, folks. Well, that is the end of another episode, 724. Lots more coming your way in the future weeks. Yeah, we still have a lot of the year left.
You're heading to Gen Con soon.
Gen Con is coming, folks. We're doing a top 10 list there. You can come watch us for that. The first of 2 Dice Tower retreats is happening, sponsored by Restoration Games. And there's a lot of new games that are coming out. I'm annoyed, Eric. I'm sitting here talking to you, and I just got the new crew in.
Oh, well, now I'm annoyed that I'm not in the same room as you.
Well, we would need a third person.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, I think they have 2-player rules for the new one. But
do they?
Yeah, I read the rules real quickly, but then not too well because I need glasses to read rules now, so I don't have them on me. I'm getting old. I'm older than I was in episode 1, that's for sure. All right. Well, folks, thanks again for listening. Have a fantastic day. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
and you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode number 724 was recorded on August 20th, 2021. Mandy and Suzanne take the controls for next week's episode, and in 2 weeks, Suzanne joins me and Tom to break down our top 10 trash-talking games. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. If a catastrophic event has become more than you can handle, find out how we can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Mandy, Suzanne, and Eric with assistance from Rob Searing, Chris Yee, Mike DeLisio, and Roy Kennedy. Our town of half-human, half-horse beings brought to you by Welcome to Centaurville. Timothy Pinkham composed our theme, and hosting is provided by Game Nerds, your all-in-one solution for all your nerdy needs at GameNerds.com. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at tom@dicetower.com or eric@dicetower.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower network, including Rolling Dice and Taking Names, All the Bits, This Game is Broken, Blue Peg, Pink Peg, The Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast, and Dice Tower Tonight. Find your next favorite at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. I don't know, Tom, if you got designing, you could still release a Spiel des Jahres winner. That could be your goal.
What? I'm over here playing the crew.
Oh, come back.